I'm Dr. Pete Economo, the East Coast psychologist,
And I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin, the West Coast psychologist.
and this is When East
Meets West. Pete, we are recording this, as the pandemic is, I'm going to say, waning. Thankfully it's still happening, but it's waning. And so we want to talk about adjusting today, which obviously goes beyond the pandemic. But hey, Pete, yeah, talking about adjusting.
Adjusting is good. It's critical. It's essential. I know we'll talk a little bit about the diagnosis too, because I never liked that diagnosis.
You never liked adjustment disorder?
No.
Oh, so I like it quite a bit.
Well, because for me, it's not a disorder.
Right. Well, So I guess listeners will get into it in a moment. Well, maybe we're actually on the same page about it. I like it as a way to identify it. Okay. So adjusting. So we wanted to talk about adjusting because obviously this current context that we're in, because Pete and I were discussing how, we've been talking to a lot of folks who, even though they're grateful that things are moving in an optimistic direction with the pandemic, right? That I think it's like as of today now, everywhere in the United States, everyone can over 16, I think, can get a vaccination appointment if they want it. And things are starting to slowly open back up. And yet we're also hearing people still, feeling off or also feeling some anxiety about things opening up, right?
Yes.
Yeah, right. So what do you make of that? Yeah, how do you conceptualize that?
It's a lot of uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So we're still in the world of uncertainty. So that's interesting for us to reflect on. So as we got into this, we were uncertain. And now that we're waning or coming out of this, it's uncertain.
Mm-hmm. Right. And then I guess this is what you and I always come back to, right? Which is, and things are always uncertain. Like that's like a constant in the universe, right? That the next moment is uncertain.
Right. So the next moment of coming out of this, because there's uncertainty around the vaccine, it's and again, we're not going to get into the science of vaccinations. We're not going to get into the politics of vaccinations, which we've never lived in such a highly politicized vaccination discussion, right? I guess Jenny McCarthy had one maybe 10 years ago, but that was like all unfounded.
Yes, and that's where all that started. But we'll leave that. We'll kind of mindfully come back to adjusting. Which and I also think that there's a big piece of this around, actually like thinking of it from a behaviorist lens, right, and actually in an exposure-based lens that we have to reacclimate to some things that we are now pretty rusty at doing, including like being around other people. It's like, I am like, do I know how to hold a conversation? I'm like, I don't know. I was pretty skilled interpersonally, but I don't know. Nikki,
you may have lost a little bit.
I may have lost, like
Doubt
there's that.
It.
Yeah. I'm sure you've seen, obviously
everyone has felt that way though.
Right. Well, there's the smooth brain meme. Have you seen that? If you guys haven't seen, and I'm not on social media. I read about it in some article. I'm like, what is this? And it's like saying like our brains are like smooth now, no folds. Like we're just like, it's like, nothing going on in there.
Yeah. Yeah. There's going to be a learning curve of readjusting, to the world post-COVID. And I think, again, for me, it's about really embracing that this is just the world that we're in. And that means it's uncertain. And this is not like a negative comment, but like, I believe this is going to be, we're going to have other pandemics and a lot sooner than 100 years, and so I think that scares people. And so I think that's what we're talking about today is that, yes, interpersonally, people are returning. Do I shake your hand? Do I fist bump? Do I hug? Do I not hug? I think that's something that people are really uncomfortable around. And then, like you said, just trying to hold a conversation, leading probably to like substance use increase, because.
Yeah. We're like just not used to like, you have no schedule other than like being in your house. Right. You know what I'm saying? Even that, it's just like, even energy wise, like we're not used to like.
Oh, well, I know every time. So
right?
I will say that I have been around a lot of people during the pandemic because athletes were, in session sports. Once they upticked, I didn't have to, values, I chose to be there for them because they had to be there for the people who were there for entertainment. You know, and I felt for those that I was working with, it was important that I was there for them. So I think I've had a little bit of like sprinkling in of like that energy, but you know, for our listeners, what I'm hearing you say is like, when I'm around a lot of people, I tend to feel emotionally drained by the end of it. So if I have a long day of seeing people right after the other, by the end of the day, I want a little bit of quiet time.
Yeah. And you know, and maybe before the pandemic, you might have been somebody that you wouldn't have required as much of that, right? Like, because I think that I keep hearing in therapy from people is, you know, and I tease patients about this. They'll say like,
you tease patients in
oh,
therapy?
I do. Yeah. I do like me. I love me some jokes. So, you know, I'll say like, you know, because people will go like, I don't get it. Like, why, you know, why am I feeling so burned out? Or like, why is it hard? I'm like, seriously? Like, like you don't, well, you don't know why? And they're like, no, tell me. I'm like, well, I don't know. We just like went through this bananas pandemic we weren't expecting, you know, that impacts our brains. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, I mean, and that's it's an interesting thing. We have to remind people that that's what we're in. And I think that that's because of us coming out of it. You know, I think it's like we're all just trying to like, you know, rip off our clothes and run out into the cold water, right? Because we've, or in my case, rip off our sweats. Aaron always has their sweats or whatever. Right. But because we're just tired of it. You know, we're tired of feeling locked down, and we're just ready to get to, you know, some normalcy, some interpersonal connection. I will say, just to share, even pre-COVID, after I had a long day or, you know, based on the nature of our job, I liked and needed that downtime. And so one of the things for me that was a big adjustment initially was not having the drive or the walk, you know, as my de-escalation after work.
Sure.
And then now it's like, I've gotten better at that, but still looking for like, what am I doing for self-care? How am I taking care of myself as I'm adjusting back?
Right. And yes, and I think I appreciate that example too, because I think really what Pete and I are wanting to highlight is that, and this, you know, goes along with our change episode too, is that when something shifts, it requires adjusting, adapting, right? Like that. And this pandemic hopefully has given people their own real world experiential data that humans are very adaptable. Like I think we don't give ourselves enough credit for that. We've got some not so helpful things about our species and how we're wired, though. That's a really helpful and important one, is this adaptability and this ability to adjust. And, you know, Pete just made a really great point that, you know, because everybody wants to just like, we're tired of it. Like we want things to go back to the way they were. We want to like jump into the cold water, you know, that's the mind, right? Creating these expectations of how it should be. And it's like, we want to orient back to like one step at a time. Like we've got to, you know, there's no just snapping our fingers and turning a light switch on and going, yeah, I feel great again. It's like, that's actually going to help. That's going to make us feel worse when we're having a hard time. It's like, we want to really compassionately allow ourselves to just do things one step at a time. I mean, I am practicing that myself, and I am saying that in every session with people. I'm like, you know, one moment at a time here, guys. You know, like you're going to get there. You're going to, you know, you're adjusting as we speak, though. We can't adjust, you know, it's
not
adjusting.
A marathon, it's a sprint. It's adjusting.
It's adjusting, that ing, right?
That's right.
Well, Pete, do you want?
It's not a sprint; it's a marathon. I think I just
you inverse.
I misspoke. Oops.
We're tired. I was gonna say we're adjusting. Pete and I are also adjusting.
We are adjusting.
I was gonna say, do you want to talk a little bit about then this concept of adjustment disorder? So, you know,
that we started with. Yeah. Well, because adjustment disorder. So the reason I don't like it is, one, I don't think it's a disorder. So just for listeners, the DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which we use in the US, has a diagnosis, adjustment disorder, which allows for the development of an emotional or behavioral symptom in response to identifiable stressor occurring within 3 months of the onset. I mean, hello, like what? So it could be anything.
It could be anything. Well, it could be a breakup. It could be a move. It could be the pandemic,
pandemic.
whatever. Right. The pandemic, having a new baby, whatever, anything that could happen to you,
Wedding.
you could make it.
Anything you could think of could be an adjustment disorder. And
correct.
so that's what the diagnosis is. I mean, look, there's other stuff there that there's symptoms that are clinically significant. So it might be affecting sleep or appetite or libido. You don't meet criteria for anything else. They don't, and often adjustment disorder is related to bereavement, which also gets me annoyed because another diagnosis where it's like, don't tell me how to bereave, which we talked about with Robin too.
Yeah.
On that episode. So that's the disorder. The other thing I'll say about it is that the insurance companies give patients a hard time about it.
Yeah, they can sometimes. And I'll just say, and like I said a moment ago, Pete and I actually are in agreement about this. We're just looking at slightly different sides of it. Yeah. I agree with everything Pete's saying. And the reason that I quote unquote like it, only, I quote unquote like it only, what I mean by that is I appreciate that there's a way for me to, make the case that people need support sometimes for their response to a stressor. And so, the unfortunate thing in the way we do things in a Western psychological, perspective is that we can end up over pathologizing things. That's the downside. The upside is that we can sometimes really give space to say like, no, this is a real thing that you're struggling with, So
you like the validation of it. You have it because any diagnosis. So what we'll say for listeners, which I think you and I are probably also on the same page with, is that any diagnosis validates a person we're working with based on whatever their experience is. So, for example, like I've had clients who, when I can talk to them about autism spectrum disorder, they're like, "Oh, that's what it like. Thank you." Or
it's clarifying. It's valid. It's like you're not alone, and it's like my response is real. Like I'm not making it up. So that's what I appreciate about that. What I don't appreciate it, and I think the language piece, what Pete's really getting at, is really important. Is like calling it a disorder, and then even the term adjust, and like we were just kind of redefining, it's like adjustment. It's like this ending thing, and it's as
if you just arrive.
Right. It's like
because and so maybe that's the Zen stuff that I could speak on, because it's like once you feel like you've arrived, then you're going to your next place. Because that's and so adjustment, even the definition, which of course I love to give.
Yes, I know you do.
The process of adapting or becoming used to a new situation.
Yeah.
So
and then,
what that should say is the process of living.
Yeah. They're like, and then the next moment, you're like, I would love it. It's like, I would love to have a Buddhist monk just sit there and be like, yeah, so like,
what are y'all trying to do?
What? Come on. Thing? Yeah. What? Come on.
This is the natural order of suffering.
Yeah.
And I think that's a lot of what I'm seeing. And that's why I don't like it. But anyway, I mean, do you feel the same way about it, or where are you at with it?
No. I think we're absolutely on the same page. And so, it's another dialectic, it's another middle path, right? That it's saying like, it's important to acknowledge that adjusting it can be really difficult. I mean, so much so that, in Western psychology, that we've even said it rises to the level of like, we can give it a diagnosis sometimes, right?
Well, and I'm going to correct myself, because it's not just the DSM, it is also the ICD.
Yes. Which is for our international classification folks. Yeah.
Because I think that's important, because I kind of felt like this was more of a DSM thing. So, I mean, I just want to, that makes me feel a little bit better about it. And actually, in the ICD, they're saying it's billable, but you and I both know, and I've had a lot of clients who have had, sessions bounce back because of that code.
Because of that. Yeah. Well, which I think that speaks to, again,
a bigger
there
system.
Can be, a bigger systemic problem. But
Should we
also
do an episode on that?
Yeah, we'll probably, I'll just be complaining about insurance companies all the time. I don't know if anybody wants to hear me talk about that. But I think it's speaking to that we can feel invalidated for this fact that adjusting is hard. And I think that also links to what you're saying about this expectation that it's like, I should snap my fingers and be adjusted and go back to normal. And I think really what we want to leave listeners with today is this concept that we're always adjusting, right? And there are going to be times where adjusting is more difficult than others. And it's just really important to show up to that moment in a mindful way, and bring some compassion to yourself, because it's the natural order of being alive. This has been When East Meets West. I'm Dr. Nikki Rubin.
And I'm Dr. Pete Economou. Be present, be brave. This has been When East Meets West. All material is based on opinion and educational training of Drs. Pete Economou and Nikki Rubin.
Content is for informational and educational purposes only.